I remember stepping onto the narrow path that wound through the ancient forest. The earth beneath my feet, soft and cool, muffled by centuries of fallen leaves. The air was different here, heavier, with a quiet I had never known before. A gentle stillness that seemed to press lightly against my chest. I inhaled slowly, tasting the faint sweetness of damp moss and pine, and I felt my shoulders loosen, as if the weight of the day had already begun to fall away. The wind came then, almost imperceptibly at first, brushing against the tips of the trees and carrying with it a murmur that seemed strangely familiar. It was as if the forest itself were speaking, whispering secrets I had always known but had forgotten. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound fill me, letting it curl softly around my thoughts, quieting the rush of everyday life. Each breath became a gentle wave, a rhythm that pulsed from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. I began walking again, my steps deliberate and unhurried, feeling the path guide me rather than the other way around. Every crackle of leaves underfoot, every subtle rustle of branches above, felt like a conversation with the world. I noticed a small stream to my left, its waters glinting in the fading light like scattered silver. The sound of the flowing water blended with the wind, forming a melody that was neither hurried nor urgent, but patient, timeless. I felt a strange comfort in its presence, as if it were telling me that everything in life flows, and I too must flow, surrendering to the gentle current of time. There was a clearing ahead, and as I stepped into it, the wind seemed to shift, wrapping around me in a way that was tender, protective, like a soft blanket draped across my shoulders. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in delicate beams, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the air. I sank to the forest floor, feeling the coolness of the grass and earth beneath me. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to simply be. No plans, no worries, no expectations, only the present moment and the soft, whispering wind. I thought of the life I had left behind outside this forest, of the clamor and haste, of voices and screens and schedules that demanded more than I could give. And yet, sitting here, surrounded by the gentle embrace of nature, I realized how easily those burdens could dissolve, how fleeting they were compared to this quiet eternity. My mind began to untangle, each thought slowing down, untwisting like the soft coils of smoke rising from a distant lantern. The wind spoke again, its voice gentle but insistent, carrying images of distant mountains, of still lakes reflecting the sky, of trees bending gracefully under the weight of unseen storms. I imagined walking those distant paths, following the wind wherever it would lead, letting it guide me without resistance. I felt my chest expand and contract with a rhythm deeper than my usual breath. A rhythm that belonged not to me alone, but to the forest itself. To the world that had been here long before and would remain long after. Time seemed to stretch, and yet it did not matter. I noticed a bird perched on a low branch, its feathers soft and ruffled, watching me with quiet curiosity. The bird's song was not loud, but it resonated within me, a tiny bell of clarity in the haze of my thoughts. Even as I listened, I understood that there was no rush to move, no need to speak, no requirement to act. Here, in this moment, everything I sought peace, understanding. Solace was already present, flowing around me like the wind itself. A soft mist began to rise from the forest floor, curling around the bases of the trees and curling into the air like faint whispers of forgotten dreams. I breathed it in slowly, savoring the cool dampness, and felt it seep into my very being, cleansing the corners of my mind that had grown heavy with doubt and worry. Each inhale drew the world closer. Each exhale let it drift away. I was both part of this forest and, apart from it, a silent observer wrapped in the gentle sighs of wind and water. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in pale hues of amber and rose. Shadows stretched long and thin, tracing patterns across the forest floor that seemed almost alive. I lay back on the grass, letting the earth support me fully, and felt the wind settle over me like a soft hand stroking my hair, brushing against my skin with a gentle insistence that I relax completely. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts softer, less urgent. The world narrowed to this clearing, this forest, this gentle caress of wind. Even as darkness began to gather between the trees, the wind never ceased. Its whispers carried the stories of the forest of creatures unseen, of roots deep beneath the earth, of streams that had flowed for centuries. And I listened, letting it fill the spaces between my own thoughts, letting it teach me a rhythm older than any memory I possessed. Each sigh of wind was a lesson in letting go, in trusting that the world, in all its quiet vastness, moves at its own pace, and I, too, could move with it. I closed my eyes fully, then, surrendering to the gentle cadence of the wind and the soft embrace of the forest. I imagined the trees swaying, their branches murmuring, the leaves whispering in a language I did not need words to understand. I felt my body sink deeper into the earth, my mind drifting like a feather carried by a soft current. And in that moment, I knew I was safe, cradled by the stillness, carried gently by the endless, whispering wind. I rose slowly from the forest floor. The soft moss beneath me, cushioning each movement, and began to follow a path that seemed almost to appear before my feet as I walked. The wind, which had whispered so gently in the clearing, now carried a subtle, fragrant, sweet, earthy, and calming, leading me forward as though it had a destination in mind for me. Each step was measured, deliberate, yet effortless. I felt no urgency, no pull of time, only the quiet insistence of presence. After a few moments, the trees parted, and I found myself at the edge of a hidden garden, a place so still and perfect that it seemed untouched by the world outside. Sunlight spilled over ancient stone pathways and delicate petals, bathing everything in a warm, golden hue. Tiny streams traced silver lines across the earth, and the air shimmered with the quiet life of countless unseen creatures. I paused, closing my eyes and inhaling slowly, letting the scent of jasmine and wet earth fill my lungs. And I felt the tension in my body begin to melt away. I wandered into the garden, my bare feet brushing against soft grass and the cool edges of fallen leaves. There was a pond at its center, perfectly round, reflecting the sky like a mirror. The water was still, but alive, catching the light in ways that made it seem almost sacred. I knelt at the edge, dipping my fingers lightly into the surface, feeling the gentle resistance of liquid against my skin. Ripples spread slowly outward, and as I watched them fade, I felt the ripples of my own thoughts beginning to dissolve in the stillness of this place. A small stone bridge arched over the pond, worn smooth by countless footsteps, and I crossed it slowly, noticing the fine cracks and tiny patches of moss that had taken root over the years. I realized that the garden itself was alive in a quiet, unobtrusive way. Every stone, every petal, every blade of grass seemed to exist in harmony, each with its own rhythm, yet all moving together in a subtle, unspoken dance. I felt drawn to follow that rhythm, to let my own breath and heartbeat align with the pulse of the garden. There were benches carved from the trunks of old trees, curved and smooth, inviting me to sit. I chose one beneath a sprawling cherry blossom, its branches heavy with delicate pink blooms that quivered slightly in the soft breeze. As I settled onto the bench, I felt an almost magnetic calm spreading through me. My mind, which had been restless not long ago, now floated freely, untethered, moving like a leaf drifting on the water. Thoughts came and went, but none lingered. They were simply noticed, acknowledged, and released, like whispers fading into the wind. I watched the shadows shift across the garden as the sun moved lower in the sky. The light danced along the pond, the petals, and the stones, painting gentle patterns that seemed almost alive. Somewhere nearby, a small bird sang, its voice soft and melodic, weaving through the gentle rustle of leaves. I realized that the garden had its own language, a slow and patient conversation with anyone who was willing to listen. And I was listening. I felt the subtle movements of life all around me, the tiny insects crawling over the bark, the soft trickle of the streams, the faint quiver of leaves, and I understood. Without words, that stillness was not emptiness, but fullness in its purest form. As I moved further into the heart of the garden, I found a path lined with lanterns, each carved from stone and weathered by time. Their surfaces were rough and worn, yet somehow comforting, as if they had been placed there not for guidance, but for companionship. I walked slowly between them, letting my fingers brush against the cool surfaces, feeling a strange sense of connection with those who had walked this path before me, and those who would walk it long after. The air seemed thicker here, infused with a sense of patience and wisdom, and I felt my thoughts settle into a rhythm of quiet observation. In the center of the garden, I discovered a small pavilion, open on all sides, where sunlight streamed in through the latticework, casting delicate patterns on the ground. I stepped inside and sat cross-legged, allowing the warmth to seep into my bones. The wind, ever present yet subtle, moved around me, lifting the edges of my clothing and carrying the scent of the flowers to my senses. I closed my eyes and listened, not only to the wind or the birds, but to the quiet hum of life itself. Though almost imperceptible vibrations that threaded through every leaf, every stone, every drop of water. Here, I felt a sense of balance I had never known before. My mind, once scattered with the noise of everyday life, was now calm and focused, yet relaxed. Thoughts arrived and departed like clouds floating across the sky, unhurried, unforced, unnoticed except for their passing. I realized that this stillness was not something I needed to find or achieve. It was something I had always carried inside me, waiting for a place like this to remind me of its presence. The garden did not teach me by words alone. It taught me by its being, by the harmony in every detail, by the gentle insistence that I slow down and notice, that I exist fully in this single, perfect moment. Time seemed to stretch and dissolve. Hours could have passed, or perhaps only minutes. The light softened further, bathing the garden in tones of amber and rose. The streams reflected the colors of the sky. The petals glowed faintly, and the lanterns seemed to hum with quiet energy. I felt my body grow heavy in the best way, sinking into the earth beneath me, supported by the ancient soil and the enduring presence of the garden. My mind floated effortlessly, aware yet untangled, moving with the gentle rhythms. I imagined walking along the stone paths once more, touching each flower, each leaf, each ripple in the water, acknowledging the life within them and within myself. There was no rush, no destination, only the journey itself, gentle and unfolding. The garden whispered again, not in words, but in feeling, patience, understanding, presence. And I listened, absorbing each subtle message, each delicate vibration, letting it flow through me and settle deep within my chest, where I could carry it long after I left this place. The pavilion seemed to breathe with me, expanding slightly with each inhale, contracting with each exhale. I could feel the wind weaving around my body, brushing against my skin, lifting my hair in delicate strands. And as I sat there, I allowed myself to sink fully into the sensation of stillness, letting it fill every corner of my being. I realized that I did not need to seek peace. It was here, always waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to arrive, waiting for me to let go. I finally lay back on the wooden floor of the pavilion, feeling the cool grains beneath me and the warmth of sunlight on my face. The garden, alive yet quiet, surrounded me completely. Every leaf, every stone, every ripple of water spoke softly to me, reminding me that the world could move without haste, that I could move without urgency, that I could simply be. And in that knowing, I let myself drift, fully present, yet surrendering, carried gently on the currents of the garden's stillness. I walked slowly from the pavilion, leaving the serene beauty of the garden behind, though its stillness lingered in me like a soft echo. The path ahead was less certain now, winding into shadows where sunlight struggled to reach. And as I continued, I became aware of a subtle tension rising within me, like the faint tremor before a storm. It was not fear, exactly, but a stirring of old thoughts, worries I had thought buried, doubts I had believed long forgotten. I realized that even here, in this haven of quiet, the mind could summon its own turbulence. At first, the sensations were mild, almost imperceptible. A flicker of impatience, a whisper of regret, a thought that I might not be enough. I tried to ignore them, to let the stillness of the forest and garden soothe them away. But they persisted, curling softly around my consciousness. And then, slowly, deliberately, I faced them. I named them quietly in my mind: anxiety, fear, sorrow, longing. Each one came forward, not as an enemy, but as a presence that needed acknowledgement. I stopped walking and closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the forest surround me, feeling the wind lift gently around my body. I imagined my thoughts as stones in a clear stream, each one carried by the current. Some floated easily, some sank briefly before rising again, and some collided with others, creating ripples that disturbed the water. The current was the flow of my own awareness, patient and unhurried. And as I observed, I began to see that these inner struggles were not obstacles, but companions, teachers that had arrived disguised as burdens. They were here to show me where my attention was too tightly held, where my grip on expectation caused tension, where my desire to control had clouded the simplicity of being. With each step along the shadowed path, I felt a subtle battle unfold inside me. Memories arose like fog, times I had failed, times I had been hurt, moments I wished could be undone. And yet, for each memory, I allowed a breath, a gentle exhalation that let it drift past. I did not push them away. I did not cling to them. I simply noticed them, acknowledged them, and let them flow on as the wind moved through the trees above me. I realized that the battle was not against these thoughts, but against the resistance I felt toward them. By resisting, I created tension. By accepting, I discovered space. The deeper I walked into the forest, the more vivid the confrontation became. I imagined myself standing before a mirror, my reflection surrounded by shadows. Each shadow represented a fear, a doubt, a regret. I studied them carefully, noting their shapes, their textures, the way they seemed to shift when I looked too closely. And then, slowly, I began to breathe into them. I imagined each shadow softening, its edges melting into light until the reflection before me was both whole and fractured, aware and serene, a coexistence of all parts of myself. I reached a small clearing where the wind whispered through the trees in long, measured breaths. The sunlight, now faint and golden, sifted through the leaves, casting delicate patterns on the ground. I knelt in the center of this clearing, placing my hands lightly on the cool earth. I felt the pulse of life beneath me, steady and unhurried, and I began to imagine my inner struggle as part of that larger rhythm. The forest, the earth, the wind, they all bore witness to my process, neither judging nor rushing, simply holding space. I felt a profound sense of permission settle within me, permission to feel, permission to release, permission to rest within the tension without trying to fix it. I noticed my heartbeat, slow and steady, a drum that anchored me in the present. Thoughts continued to arrive, but now they came with gentleness, like leaves drifting down from the trees rather than crashing violently into my awareness. Anxiety softened into awareness, fear transformed into curiosity, and regret faded into understanding. Each breath became a rhythm, a meditation, a dialogue between the restless mind and the patient heart. And in that rhythm, I discovered that the battle itself was not a struggle to win, but a practice in surrendering. Time seemed to bend around me. Minutes stretched and blurred, and I felt myself moving in and out of consciousness, aware yet untangled, floating between thought and stillness. I imagined the shadows around me lifting, dissolving into shafts of light that threaded through the trees. I sensed that my inner tension was not something to conquer, but to embrace, to walk through with open hands and an open heart. The forest, with all its quiet majesty, reflected back to me the truth I had almost forgotten. Peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of acceptance. I recalled moments from my life that had seemed overwhelming, choices I had regretted, words I had spoken or left unsaid, paths I had taken that had led me astray. I allowed myself to feel the weight of these memories fully, and then, with each exhale, I released them into the gentle currents of the wind. The wind accepted them without question, carrying them away from me, as though the forest itself had become a sacred confessional, a safe space where the soul could unburden itself without fear or judgment. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft pastels, I noticed a small stream winding through the clearing. Its waters were clear and patient, and I knelt beside it, letting the cool liquid flow over my fingertips. I imagined the stream washing not only my hands, but my thoughts, each ripple carrying away tension, each wave smoothing the rough edges of my mind. And as I listened to the gentle babble, I felt my internal storm gradually calm. The currents of my heart, once turbulent, now moved with ease, guided by a rhythm older than any worry, older than any fear. I rose and walked further, the shadows lengthening, the air cooler against my skin. The path narrowed and curved, leading me deeper into the forest, but I no longer felt trepidation. Each step was confident, grounded, yet soft, as though I were floating above the earth even while my feet touched it. Battle had not been defeated in the usual sense. Sit had been understood, welcomed, and transformed. The struggle had revealed itself as a mirror, reflecting the parts of myself that demanded attention, care, and gentle acceptance. I paused at a clearing where the trees parted to reveal the night sky, dotted with early stars. The wind whispered once more, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, mingling with the distant murmur of water. I breathed in deeply, letting the cool night air fill me, and I imagined my inner tensions lifting like smoke, dissolving into the vast, silent expanse above. I felt a profound lightness, a gentle liberation, as if the forest itself had taught me the simplest truth, that peace is not a destination, but a companion along the journey, present even in the midst of struggle. I lay down on the soft forest floor once more, letting the earth support me completely. The wind brushed against my face, wrapping me in its gentle embrace. Shadows of leaves played across my skin, moving slowly as though in a silent dance with the stars above. I closed my eyes fully, surrendering to the night, to the wind, to the quiet understanding that had settled within me. The inner battle had not vanished, had softened, become a companion, a teacher, a guide, and in that acceptance, I felt the first tender threads of a deeper rest weaving through my body, mind, and soul with each breath. Each sigh of the wind, I sank further into stillness, letting the gentle rhythms of nature cradle me. The forest held me, the earth bore me, the wind sang softly through the trees, and I felt myself floating in the quiet harmony of all that surrounded me. My thoughts, once turbulent, now moved like leaves on a calm stream, drifting without resistance, without urgency. And as the night deepened, I realized that I had found a sanctuary not outside myself, but within the quiet, enduring space where struggle meets surrender, where awareness meets peace, where the inner battle becomes a doorway to rest. I moved slowly through the quiet forest, each step deliberate, each breath deep and steady. The night had settled fully around me, soft shadows stretching across the ground, mingling with the faint silver glow of the moon. My body felt light, yet grounded, as if the earth beneath me was supporting not only my weight, but also the stillness that had begun to grow within. I realized that after the inner struggle, I was no longer walking in fear or tension. The forest seemed to acknowledge my calm, its gentle rustling of leaves harmonizing with the subtle rhythm of my heartbeat. A narrow path led me to a small clearing where a single ancient tree stood, its branches wide and gnarled, leaves whispering secrets I could almost understand. I approached it slowly, feeling a sense of reverence that I had never known before. Sitting beneath its boughs, I felt as though the tree itself had been waiting for me, patient and wise. Its presence exuded a kind of quiet authority, a silent teaching that required no words, no instruction, only awareness. I inhaled the night air deeply, carrying the earthy scent of moss and fallen leaves into my lungs, and felt the stillness settle more firmly into my chest. I closed my eyes and listened. The forest spoke, not in language, but in subtle currents of sound and movement. A soft rustle of branches here, the faint gurgle of a distant stream there, the gentle sigh of wind weaving through the trees, all of it formed a slow, deliberate symphony of presence. In that moment, I understood that stillness was not merely the absence of motion, but a conscious awareness of everything that is, a way of being fully engaged while remaining completely calm. Each breath became a teacher, each heartbeat a reminder. each glance at the night sky a meditation. I focused on the sensations within my own body, the weight of my limbs on the earth, the softness of my clothing against my skin, the rise and fall of my chest with every inhale and exhale. And as I observed, I began to notice the quiet spaces between thoughts, the gentle pauses where the mind simply rested, free from judgment or expectation. These pauses felt like a hidden current beneath the surface of my awareness, a river of calm flowing through the depths of my consciousness. I let myself drift in those spaces, feeling the tensions of the past dissolve and the uncertainties of the future soften into gentle shadows at the edges of perception. Time seemed to stretch and fold in the quiet of the clearing. I became aware of a presence beside me, subtle and comforting, as if the forest itself had taken form in a soft, guiding light. I felt no need to question it, no need to name it. Instead, I allowed myself to receive its teaching in the only way it could be given, through stillness. Each inhalation brought clarity. Each exhalation released doubt. I imagined my mind as a calm lake, every ripple of thought smoothing over into reflections of moonlight, and I allowed the ripples to settle naturally. Without interference, a gentle breeze moved through the branches above, and I felt it brush against my face and arms, carrying with it a sense of patience and eternal presence. I understood that this was the teaching of stillness, to exist fully in the moment, to observe without grasping, to feel without reacting. Every sensation, every sound, every faint movement of air or leaf became a lesson in letting go. I felt a quiet gratitude bloom within me for all that I had experienced, the struggles, the victories, the quiet moments of reflection, each one leading me to this deeper understanding. I rose and walked slowly to a stone path that wound through the clearing. The stones were smooth and cool beneath my feet, and as I moved, I imagined each step as a deliberate meditation. I paid attention to the sensation of the ground, the subtle shifts in balance, the soft pressure of the earth under my soles. With every step, the forest seemed to breathe in rhythm with me, a silent dialogue of presence and awareness. I realized that stillness is not stagnant. It moves and flows, alive and responsive, inviting participation without demand. I came to a small wooden bridge over a quiet stream. The water shimmered in the moonlight, reflecting the night sky in gentle waves. I paused, listening to the soft trickle, letting its rhythm synchronize with my own. The stream taught me that stillness does not require rigidity. It is flexible, adaptable, flowing even amidst obstacles, and yet profoundly calm at its core. I let my fingers trail lightly over the water's surface, feeling its coolness, feeling its persistent patience, and I understood that my own mind could move in this same way, acknowledging thoughts and emotions without resistance, allowing them to flow gently past. I continued along the path, noticing the subtle glow of fireflies, each flicker a reminder of the small, quiet joys often overlooked. I felt a sense of unity with all that surrounded me. The trees, the water, the air, the soft creatures that stirred in the underbrush. The forest was alive, yet every movement was balanced, intentional, harmonious. And as I walked, I realized that the teaching of stillness is a conversation, a continuous dialogue between self and world, one that requires attention, patience, and gentle awareness. Eventually, I returned to the base of the ancient tree and settled once more beneath its protective boughs. I lay back, feeling the cool earth beneath me and the gentle sway of leaves above. The wind whispered softly, carrying the subtle scents and sounds of the forest, and I allowed myself to dissolve into its rhythm. My mind floated effortlessly between awareness and rest, observing without interference, participating without effort. The teaching of stillness had become tangible within me, a living presence, a calm that did not demand perfection. Only presence. I noticed my thoughts drifting, sometimes returning, sometimes fading like morning mist. I welcomed each one, acknowledging it with a gentle breath and letting it move on. There was no urgency, no need to solve or change anything. I simply existed, fully and completely, in the quiet embrace of the night, of the forest, and of my own awareness. Each sound of the wind, each distant call of an owl, each ripple of the stream became a guide, teaching me the subtle art of presence. The moon rose higher, casting soft silver patterns across the clearing. I felt a profound sense of surrender, an acceptance of all that I was, all that I had been, and all that I might become. The teaching of stillness was no longer something external. It had woven itself into the very fabric of my being. I felt the rhythm of my heart, the flow of my breath, the gentle pulse of the earth beneath me. And I understood that true stillness is not an escape, but a profound engagement, a way of being that allows the soul to rest while remaining fully alive. I lay there, fully immersed in this presence, letting the forest cradle me, letting the wind teach me, letting the night itself guide me deeper into calm. And as I drifted slowly towards sleep, I knew that the teaching of stillness was not a single lesson, but an ongoing practice, a lifelong journey, a gentle whisper reminding me always to breathe, to observe, to be. I opened my eyes slowly as the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon, painting the forest in soft shades of rose and gold. The night had passed like a gentle river, leaving behind only traces of quiet wisdom in the spaces of my mind. I rose from beneath the ancient tree, where I had spent the hours of deep stillness, feeling a lightness I had never known before. My body moved easily, as if every muscle had learned to breathe and stretch in harmony with the earth. And my heart carried a calm rhythm that resonated with the morning breeze. I wandered along the familiar path, noticing how the world seemed renewed. Each leaf, each blade of grass, each drop of dew reflecting a delicate perfection. There was no urgency, no thought of time, only the simple act of being fully present. I breathed in the crisp air, tasting the faint sweetness of the forest, and I realized that every step I took now was a meditation. Each movement a continuation of the practice that had begun the night before. My mind, once tangled with anxiety and doubt, flowed freely like a river, unbound. Guided by an inner light I could feel but not name. The pond in the heart of the garden shimmered with the first rays of sunlight. I approached it slowly, kneeling beside the water, and gazed at my reflection. What I saw was familiar, yet different. My eyes held a quiet clarity, a gentle brightness that came not from the absence of thought, but from their careful observation. I traced the ripples on the surface with my fingers, watching the concentric circles expand and vanish. And I understood that the mind, like water, could reflect perfectly when it was allowed to settle. The calm I had cultivated within was now mirrored outward, blending seamlessly with the world around me. I walked further into the garden, following the stone path that curved gracefully through the trees. The lanterns that had guided me the night before now glowed softly in the dawn light, casting long, delicate shadows that danced along the stones. I realized that enlightenment was not a sudden revelation, nor a distant goal to chase, but a continuous awakening to the present moment. Every breath, every heartbeat, every gentle rustle of leaves was a teacher, a guide leading me toward an understanding that existed in simplicity and presence rather than complexity or striving. As I moved toward the small pavilion, the air seemed charged with a gentle energy, a quiet pulse that resonated with the rhythm of my own body. I sat, cross-legged, on the smooth wooden floor, closing my eyes and listening to the symphony of the morning, the faint gurgle of the stream, the soft murmur of wind through the trees, the distant song of a bird greeting the new day. I felt my consciousness expand, not in grandeur, but in clarity, awareness stretching like soft light through the chambers of my mind. I realized that the enlightened mind is not an escape from the world, but a way of engaging with it fully, without attachment, without fear, without expectation. Thoughts continued to drift across my awareness, but they came gently, without the urgency or turmoil of before. I watched them rise and fall like clouds in a vast sky, acknowledging their presence without clinging, without judgment. Each moment of awareness became a meditation, each exhale a release, each inhalation a connection to the life that surrounded me. I felt the rhythm of the forest, the flow of the streams, the gentle sway of the trees, merging seamlessly with a pulse of my own being. In this, I recognized the truth I had sought without knowing it. The mind, when fully present, is a mirror of the universe itself, reflecting harmony and stillness, light and shadow, clarity and depth. I rose and walked to the edge of the garden, where the path led toward a hill that overlooked the wider forest. The sun now rose higher, spilling golden light across the treetops, illuminating the soft haze of morning. I paused, feeling the warmth on my skin and the coolness of the earth beneath my feet. And I realized that enlightenment is not a distant place, but a state of being, accessible with each conscious breath, with each mindful step, with each moment of surrender to what is. I understood that every struggle I had faced, every inner battle, every moment of doubt, had been a teacher guiding me toward this awareness. The gentle wind stirred the leaves above, and I let it brush against my face, carrying the faint scent of flowers and damp earth. I imagined my thoughts and worries dissolving into the breeze, drifting away, leaving only the serene awareness of now. The stream beside me glimmered in the morning light, each ripple reflecting a tiny fragment of the sky. And I felt myself reflecting the stillness of the world, moving and flowing, yet perfectly at rest. In this harmony, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey I had taken, for the teachings of the night, for the guidance of the forest and the whispering wind. I wandered back to the pond, kneeling once more to touch the water. The reflection that met my eyes now was calm, centered, luminous with a soft glow of understanding. I smiled gently to myself, knowing that enlightenment is not something to grasp, but something to embody, to breathe in and live with each moment, to flow with the rhythms of life rather than resisting them. I let my hands linger on the water, feeling the coolness, feeling the constant, gentle movement, and I realized that the mind, once turbulent, can become a source of serenity when treated with patience and awareness. Sitting beneath the cherry blossom once more, I allowed myself to sink fully into the earth, letting it support me completely. The petals above swayed gently, casting dancing shadows on my skin, and I listened to the quiet symphony of life, the subtle murmur of the forest, the soft hum of wind, the distant call of awakening birds. I felt my body relax completely, my mind clear yet alive, and I understood that this was the essence of the enlightened mind, an awareness that embraces both stillness and motion, calm and vitality, observation and participation. As the morning deepened, I lay back fully, letting the forest cradle me, letting the wind and sun and light teach me in ways words could never capture. Each breath became a gentle wave, each heartbeat a pulse of presence, each thought a soft ripple across the lake of consciousness. I felt myself dissolve into the harmony of the world, aware yet untethered, awake yet at rest. The enlightenment I had sought was not a distant destination, but a quiet realization that every moment of awareness, every mindful breath, every gentle observation of life is itself the doorway to peace. And as I drifted into a state of deep calm, I knew that this was only the beginning. The enlightened mind does not end. It flows, it grows, it touches every experience with clarity and compassion. I felt the lessons of the wind, the garden, the inner struggles, and the stillness settle deep within me, weaving together into a gentle, unbroken awareness that I could carry beyond this forest, beyond this morning, beyond every challenge that might come. I let myself float in that quiet, luminous state, aware of the world, aware of myself, fully present, fully at peace, and completely surrendered to the serene, timeless flow of life. I remember the first time I found the garden of silence. It was not a place I reached by walking, nor one that appeared on any map. It was as though the world itself had decided to lead me there. After sensing that I was finally quiet enough to listen, I had been wandering aimlessly for days, my thoughts heavy with noise, my heart aching for rest. And then, one evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and the wind grew tender, I stumbled upon a narrow path of smooth stones leading into the forest. Each step I took was softer than the last. The sound of the outside world began to fade, replaced by the slow rhythm of my own breathing. Leaves whispered in languages older than time. I felt as though the trees were a life knot in the way we arb with a deep, ancient consciousness that watched over everything in stillness. The scent of earth and distant rain filled the air, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the slow trickle of water. When I reached the end of the path, I found myself standing before a gate made of bamboo. It wasn't locked, but it didn't need to be. It was as if the gate was asking me a question. Are you ready to be silent? Without answering aloud, I bowed gently, and the gate opened with a soft sigh. Inside was a garden unlike any I had ever seen. It glowed faintly beneath the evening light, and the air seemed to shimmer with peace. Small lanterns hung from branches, their flames barely flickering, as though even fire respected the quiet. A narrow stream wound through the center of the garden, its waters perfectly clear, reflecting the fading colors of the sky. There were stones placed deliberately, each one in harmony with the next, as though the universe itself had arranged them. I walked slowly, afraid that even the sound of my footsteps might disturb the sacred stillness. My thoughts began to loosen, falling away like petals in the wind. Every breath I took seemed to draw me deeper into the present moment, into something beyond words. For the first time in years, I felt what it truly meant to be here. Not tomorrow, not yesterday's, yes, here. An old monk sat near the stream, his eyes closed, his face peaceful. He didn't move or speak, but somehow I knew he was aware of me. I bowed again, and he smiled faintly, as if recognizing an old friend who had finally returned. Without words, he gestured for me to sit beside him. The ground was cool beneath me, the scent of jasmine drifting gently through the air. For a while, we sat together in silence. It wasn't an empty silence, it was alive, breathing, full of presence. The longer I sat, the more I realized that this silence wasn't something outside of me. It was within me, patiently waiting, buried under years of noise and thought. My mind tried to wander, to name things, to understand them, but every time a thought appeared, it dissolved into the sound of the stream. I watched as my worries, regrets, and plans floated by like leaves carried away by water. Time lost its edges. There was only the rhythm of the breath, the soft pulse of life around me, and a vast stillness expanding in every direction. At one point, the monk opened his eyes. They were calm, clear, like the surface of a lake, untouched by wind. "Listen," he whispered. I strained my ears, but there was no sound, only the still hum of existence itself. "That," he said softly, "is the voice of the garden." I closed my eyes and listened deeper. Beneath the silence, there was a pulsar, quiet vibration that seemed to connect everything. The stones, the water, the lanterns, the trees, all of them breathed together in unity. Even my heartbeat matched their rhythm. It was then that I understood. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything in perfect harmony. The monk smiled again and rose slowly. He began walking along the edge of the stream, his bare feet barely touching the ground. I followed him until we reached a small wooden bridge. On the other side was a single cherry blossom tree, its petals glowing faintly in the moonlight. The monk turned to me and said, "This garden exists wherever you remember it. You do not have to return here by walking. You return here by being still." He bowed, and then, as I blinked, he was gone. Only the tree remained, its blossoms swaying gently in the evening air. I sat beneath the tree for a long time. The petals fell around me like snow, resting softly on my hands and shoulders. I could feel their weightless touch each one carrying the whisper of peace. My breathing slowed even more. In the stillness, I felt a presence, something vast and kind embracing me from all sides. The night deepened, and the stars appeared one by one, shimmering above the garden like silent witnesses. I lay down on the soft grass, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to seek, no urge to fix or escape anything. The world was complete, and so was I, as I drifted closer to sleep. I heard the distant echo of the monk's words, "You return here by being still." The meaning unfolded within me, like light spreading through water. I realized that this garden was not a place hidden in the forest, was within my heart. Every moment, I allowed silence to bloom within me. The gate of bamboo would open again. The sound of the stream became slower, softer, like the rhythm of a dream. My body grew light, my mind clear. I could feel myself dissolving into the peace that surrounded everything. Thoughts faded one by one until only breath remained. And even that, too, slowly merged with the silence. I don't remember when sleep finally took me, only that it felt like returning home. Not a home built of wood or stone, but of stillness and light. I knew that the monk's garden would always be there waiting quietly, beyond thought, beyond time. When the dawn finally came, it didn't wake me with noise or light. It arrived gently, as if the sky itself was bowing in gratitude. I opened my eyes and felt the warmth of the rising sun upon my face. The garden shimmered softly, every leaf glistening with dew. Birds began to sing, not as a disruption of silence, but as its continuation. I stood slowly, feeling the calm of the night still within me. I knew it was time to leave, but something inside whispered, "You never truly leave the garden of silence." I turned toward the bamboo gate. As I walked back down the path, every sound, the wind through the leaves, the distant cry of a bird, even the soft crunch of my footsteps felt sacred. When I reached the edge of the forest, I looked back one last time. The garden was no longer visible, yet I could still feel its peace in every heartbeat. The world beyond seemed quieter now, as though the garden had followed me, and maybe it had, for now. Whenever I close my eyes and breathe deeply, I can still hear the stream, smell the jasmine, and feel the falling petals. The silence has taken root inside me, and wherever I go, it blossoms anew. The garden of silence was never somewhere to find, it was something to remember. And tonight, as I rest once more, I return there again, my walking, not by seeking, but simply by being still. When I awoke the next morning, the world felt lighter, softer, as if the air itself had been washed clean. The silence of the garden still lingered in me, echoing in every breath I took. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, and rays of sunlight filtered through their leaves, scattering gold across the ground. For a moment, I stood there, watching the dance of light and shadow, realizing that the peace I felt last night had not faded with sleep. It had followed me like a quiet companion as I walked away from the garden. I noticed a narrow trail winding up the side of a hill. It looked ancient, half hidden by moss and fallen leaves. Something within me stirred, not a curiosity, but a calm knowing that this path was meant for me to walk. I began my ascent, slowly, each step in rhythm with my breathing. The air grew cooler as I climbed. My mind, still half dreaming, began to wander, but the sound of my footsteps against the earth gently called me back. With every step, I whispered silently to myself, I am here. I am breathing. At first it felt mechanical, like repeating empty words. But as the minutes passed, I began to feel the truth behind them. The simple act of walking and breathing began to pull me into the rhythm of life itself. The forest thickened. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the canopy like threads of gold, weaving through green silk. Birds sang, insects hummed, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the deep hum of a temple bell. Its sound carried far and deep, not just through the air, but through me, vibrating in my chest. It was not a sound to be heard. It was a sound to feel. I followed that sound. With every echo of the bell, I grew more aware of the ground beneath my feet, the texture of the wind on my skin, the gentle rise and fall of my chest. My mind, which had been so restless for so many years, began to settle like dust in still water. For the first time, I realized how little attention I had ever given to the simple act of existing. I had always been chasing something, thoughts, dreams, fears, regrets, but never the present moment itself. When I reached the top of the hill, I found a small temple made of stone and wood. It was simple, humble, its roof curved gently toward the sky. In front of the entrance, there was a monk sweeping the steps with a straw broom. His movements were slow, deliberate, without hurry. Each motion seemed to carry its own meaning, its own meditation. I bowed respectfully. The monk looked up, his eyes warm and knowing. "You came from the garden," he said, not as a question, but as a truth already known. "Yes," I replied softly. "I didn't plan to. It just happened." He smiled faintly. "Nothing just happens. The garden appears only to those who have begun to listen." He gestured for me to sit by the steps, and I obeyed. The morning air was fresh and filled with the scent of pine and incense. The monk continued, sweeping, and I watched him in silence. There was a strange beauty in his movements. No rush, no laziness, no desire to finish. Just the sweep of the broom, the whisper of bristles against stone. Again and again. After a while, he spoke, his voice calm and low, almost like the wind itself. This is the path of mindfulness. It begins not with effort, but with awareness. Whatever you do, do it with your whole being. Whether you sweep, breathe, or simply sit, be fully there. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I understood. He set the broom aside and motioned for me to follow him into the temple. Inside, it was dim and peaceful. The scent of sandalwood filled the air. Candles flickered in front of a small golden statue of the Buddha. The monk knelt, and I did the same. We stayed that way for a while, and I felt a deep stillness settle between us, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. After some time, he said, "You carry noise within you. Most people do. But mindfulness is not about silencing the noise. It is about listening deeply to it, without judgment, without resistance, until it dissolves on its own." He looked at me then, and his gaze felt like a mirror. "You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices them." Something in me trembled. It was as if his words had found a hidden door inside my chest. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I could feel everything: the warmth of the candles, the beating of my heart, the subtle hum of the earth beneath me. I realized that even in stillness, life was moving everywhere. Every breath, every sound, every flicker of flame was part of the same vast rhythm. The monk spoke again. "Most of your suffering comes from forgetting this rhythm. You live as though you are separate, as though your mind, your body, and the world around you are different things. But they are not. To walk in mindfulness is to remember that you are not apart from anything. Drink," he said, "but don't just drink. Watch the steam rise. Feel the warmth on your hands. Breathe in the scent before you taste it." I did as he said. For the first time in my life, I drank tea fully. The steam curled upward like a living thing, disappearing into air. The taste was simple, earthy, yet it filled me completely. I realized how many things I had done in my life without ever truly being there for them. Eating, walking, breathing, seeing. I had been living in fragments, always somewhere else, never here. The monk smiled as if he could read my thoughts. "Now," he said softly, "you begin to awaken." We spent the rest of the day in silence. I helped him sweep the courtyard, fetch water, and light incense. Each act became a meditation. The sound of the broom, the feel of the wooden bucket's handle, the smell of the burning incense, all of it drew me deeper into the present. I began to understand what he meant. Mindfulness is not an act of doing, but of being. As evening approached, the sky turned a deep orange, and the monk invited me to sit with him on a flat stone outside the temple. From there, the entire valley was visible, bathed in fading light. The monk said quietly, "Notice how the sun sets without resistance. It doesn't hurry, it doesn't cling. That is mindfulness, the grace of letting things be as they are." We sat there until the first stars appeared. The world was wrapped in stillness again, but now that stillness felt familiar, like an old friend I had finally remembered. The sound of night insects rose around us, blending with the soft rustle of leaves. I turned to the monk. "How do I carry this peace with me when I return to the noise of life?" He smiled gently. "You don't carry it. You become it. The peace you feel now is not something outside of you. It is what you are when you stop running from the present moment." He pointed to his heart. "Mindfulness is not something you practice for an hour and then forget. It is the way of returning home to yourself in every breath." That night, I slept at the temple. The monk gave me a thin blanket and a mat by the window. The sound of the wind passing through the bamboo lulled me toward rest. But before sleep took me, I found myself listening deeply again to the rhythm of my breath, to the quiet hum of the night. Each sound became sacred, each breath a prayer. I don't know when I drifted into dreams. Only now, the path itself was glowing faintly, and every step left behind a trace of light. I heard the monk's voice echoing through the dream. "When you walk, walk. When you breathe, breathe. When you live, live." When dawn returned, I opened my eyes and watched the first light spill gently through the window. The monk was already awake, sweeping once more. The same slow, graceful rhythm. The same peace. I joined him silently, picking up another broom. Our movements were simple, but they felt infinite, a conversation between body, breath, and earth. And as I swept, I realized mindfulness was not a path to be reached, but a way to walk every path. Every step was the destination. Every breath, a return to home. I stayed at the temple for many days after that, though I lost count of how many. Each sunrise became a lesson, each meal a meditation, each silence a teacher. The monk spoke little, but I learned more from his quiet presence than I ever had from books or words. Eventually, one morning, he told me it was time to go. "The path of mindfulness does not end here," he said. "It continues wherever you are willing to be awake." I bowed deeply. "Thank you, Master," I said. He shook his head with a smile. "Don't thank me. Thank the silence that led you here. Thank the breath that has always guided you." As I descended the hill, I noticed how every sound felt alive. The crunch of gravel, the chirping of birds, the murmur of the wind through branches. Even my footsteps seemed to echo with meaning. I realized I was no longer walking to reach anywhere. I was simply walking to walk. And in that moment, I understood. Mindfulness is not found in temples or gardens. It blooms in every act of awareness. It is the thread that weaves every breath, every sound, every heartbeat into one vast tapestry of life. As the temple disappeared behind the trees, I whispered quietly to myself, I am here. I am breathing, and the world breathed back with me after leaving the temple. I continued walking along the winding forest paths, feeling a calm I had never known before. The path of mindfulness had taught me to notice every step, every breath, and yet, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, I began to sense something stirring within me. It was subtle at first, a twitch of unease, a shadow of tension, but as I walked, it grew stronger. I realized that despite all the peace I had found, there were parts of me I had never truly faced. Parts that whispered doubts, regrets, fears, and unspoken anger. I paused beneath a tall oak tree, placing my hands on its rough bark. Its presence was grounding, steady, patient. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to listen. Not to the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of birds, or the gentle sigh of wind, but to the noise within me. It was a tangled symphony, a mixture of voices that I had long ignored. There were memories I had shoved into corners, words I had never spoken, and feelings I had denied. I could feel them pulsing beneath my ribs, like a storm trapped inside. I had walked so far to find silence, yet here it was, and I felt fear rising. The fear was not of the outside world, but of myself. I realized that the inner battle I had been avoiding was unavoidable. My heart thumped with anxiety, as if warning me to stop, to turn back to the comfort of the path I knew. But I knew that the only way to continue forward was to face it. To breathe it into awareness, I sat on a smooth stone beside a stream, letting the cool water flow over my fingers. I focused on each droplet, tracing its path, letting the simple act of noticing anchor me. And then I let the thoughts come. Memories of mistakes, failures, moments of shame and guilt. They rushed at me like waves. I wanted to push them away, to distract myself, to seek comfort in the familiar routines of mindless thought. But I remembered the monk's words, listen without resistance. Let awareness hold everything. I inhaled deeply, letting the air fill my lungs, and exhaled slowly. I imagined the fear and regret as shadows within me, not enemies, but parts of my own being seeking recognition. With every breath, I welcomed them. I whispered quietly, I see you. I hear you. I am not afraid. It was not instant. The shadows resisted, twisting, writhing, threatening to engulf me. I felt anger at myself, frustration at the years I had wasted running, denial for the moments I had ignored. My chest tightened, my mind spun, and yet, beneath the rising storm, I clung to the rhythm of my breath. Inhaling, exhaling, simply noticing. Slowly, I began to see patterns, to distinguish between what was real and what was imagined, between what I could change and what had already passed. Hours seemed to pass, though the sun barely moved across the sky. I remained seated, facing the turmoil within. I imagined a mirror before me, and in it I saw myself, my fears, my regrets, my anger, and sorrow reflected honestly. I no longer flinched. I no longer judged. I simply watched. Each emotion that had once felt threatening now appeared as a wave rising and falling in a vast ocean. Temporary, passing, natural. Then came the next realization. The battle was never about winning or losing. It was not a war to conquer myself, but a dance of recognition and acceptance. The shadows within me had power only when I denied their presence. By seeing them clearly, by acknowledging their existence, I began to dissolve their grip. I felt relief, not as a sudden release, but as a slow uncoiling, a gentle unraveling of tension I had carried for years. I stood, feeling the earth beneath my feet, and took a tentative step forward. The path continued through the forest, lined with ancient pines and flowering shrubs. Each step became a meditation, each breath a reaffirmation that I could face myself without fear. The inner battle was not something to escape, it was the doorway to freedom. I began to notice how the light shifted as it filtered through the branches, creating patterns on the forest floor. Even the dancing shadows became a teacher, showing me that darkness is not the absence of light, but part of the whole. As the afternoon deepened, I came upon a clearing where the wind whispered through tall grasses. I sank to the ground, feeling the soft earth beneath me, the life pulsing invisibly through roots and soil. I let myself fully inhabit the moment, allowing both the lingering shadows and the emerging light to coexist. I realized that the mind, when left unchecked, becomes a battlefield, but the heart, when present, becomes a sanctuary. Awareness itself is the truce, the space in which opposites can exist without conflict. I closed my eyes and imagined my fears as clouds drifting across the sky. Some were dark and heavy, others light and wispy. I watched them move, knowing that the sky above remained vast, untroubled, untouched. My thoughts and emotions were like these clouds, temporary, shifting, passing. And in the vast sky of my awareness, I was free. The day faded slowly into evening. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and purple, and the first stars began to appear. I felt a new sense of patience within me, a gentle steadiness that had not been there before. I understood that the inner battle is not a single confrontation, but a lifelong companion, and that mindfulness is not a victory over it, but a continuous act of recognition and acceptance. Night settled, and I lay down upon the soft grass, gazing up at the heavens. The moon rose, casting a silver glow across the clearing, and I felt a wave of gratitude for the struggle itself. Without the shadows, I would not have known the light. Without the fear, I could not have recognized courage. Without the turmoil, I would not have discovered peace. I imagined all the moments of my life, the mistakes, the regrets, the disappointments as threads woven into a tapestry. Each thread, whether dark or bright, contributed to the whole. I saw the tapestry stretching infinitely, its patterns intricate and harmonious. My story was not separate from the universe. It was a part of it, interwoven, unbroken. With each slow breath, I felt my heart beat a line with the rhythm of the forest, the stream, the wind, and the stars above. I surrendered to the present moment, allowing awareness itself to cradle me, holding both my shadows and my light. My body relaxed, my mind softened, and a profound serenity descended, deeper than any I had felt before. In that stillness, I felt a quiet smile spreading from within. The battle was not over, nor did it need to be. It simply existed as part of the ebb and flow of life. I understood that every challenge, every fear, every shadow is an invitation to awaken, to breathe, and to be present. The night deepened, and the forest around me became a lullaby of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. I allowed myself to sink fully into the embrace of the earth, knowing that even the darkest thoughts, when held with mindfulness, could dissolve into understanding. I was both warrior and witness, both shadow and light, both seeker and home. As I drifted toward sleep, I whispered to myself softly, I am here. I see everything within me. I am not afraid. I am alive. I am whole, and the inner battle, once so fierce and unyielding, softened into a gentle hum, a rhythm of life in which I could rest, knowing that awareness and acceptance would always be my companions, guiding me through every shadow, every challenge, every step of the path. The moon rose higher. The stars shimmered more brightly, and I surrendered completely to the quiet, knowing that tomorrow the journey would continue, and I would walk it with eyes wide open, heart steady, and mind at peace. I woke before dawn, the world draped in a gentle gray, as though the night had lingered just a little longer to give me time to rest. The forest around me was quiet, not empty, but alive with subtle murmurs, the soft rustling of leaves, the distant drip of water from a branch, the faint call of an early bird. I stretched and rose slowly, feeling the cool earth beneath my feet, and the soft embrace of mist curling around the trunks of ancient trees. Each movement was deliberate, conscious. I realized I was learning something new, something deeper than walking or breathing, deeper than awareness itself. I was learning stillness. I walked along the path I had come to know, each step deliberate, grounded, yet effortless. The inner battle I had faced the previous day no longer tugged at me, but I could sense its echo, a subtle reminder of the shadows that existed within. I welcomed them without fear. Today, I understood, was not about action or effort, but about presence, about being fully attuned to the world without the interference of thought. I inhaled the crisp air, feeling it fill my lungs and spread warmth through my chest. I exhaled, letting tension leave my body, imagining it drifting into the morning mist. Eventually, I reached a small clearing. In its center was a pond, still and dark, reflecting the first hints of light on the horizon. I knelt beside it, watching my reflection ripple with the occasional drop of dew from a nearby leaf. I thought about how easily the water had been disturbed, how easily the mind, too, could ripple with thought and emotion. And yet, beneath every ripple, there was stillness, changing, calm, complete. That stillness was patient. It did not hurry. It did not judge. It simply existed. I sat cross-legged on the moss, facing the pond. I closed my eyes and felt the world around me, the coolness of the earth beneath me, the weight of my body, the rise and fall of my chest. I listened not with my ears, but with my awareness. The faint hum of insects, the distant drip of water, the wind brushing against leafage sound was a teacher. Each sound a reminder that life moved even in silence. My thoughts came, as they always did, memories, worries, fleeting desires, but this time I observed them without attachment. They were like clouds crossing the sky, temporary, passing, without altering the vast openness that I had begun to feel within. I remembered the monk's words. Stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of awareness. I breathed in deeply, letting this truth settle into my bones. Every inhale, a reminder that I was alive. Every exhale, a letting go of everything that weighed me down. I felt a subtle shift. It was not dramatic or loud, but quiet, almost imperceptibly soft settling of my mind into its natural state. Time passed, though I did not measure it. Minutes, hours, or lifetimes, it did not matter. The forest itself seemed to slow its breath to match mine. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, and I felt my body sway ever so slightly, perfectly in harmony with the world. In that moment, I understood that stillness was not a place to reach, nor a goal to achieve. It was a state of surrender, a letting go of control, a trust in the natural rhythm of life. I opened my eyes and looked at the pond again. The water had stilled completely now, reflecting the softening sky with perfect clarity. I realized that stillness was a mirror, showing me what had always been present: clarity, peace, and completeness. The turbulence of thought was natural, yet it did not define the water, just as passing thoughts do not define consciousness. I could let them ripple and fade without fear, without grasping, without resistance. A crane landed softly at the edge of the pond. Its movements were deliberate, measured, serene. I watched it step, pause, and then dip its beak into the water. There was no hurry, no distraction, only presence. And I understood that this was a living lesson in stillness, the balance of patience and awareness, of movement and calm, of seeing without interference. I felt a quiet smile spread across my face, and for the first time, I felt the peace of being completely at home within myself. As the day grew brighter, I walked slowly along the edge of the pond, letting my feet feel every stone, every patch of moss. I noticed the patterns in the grass, the texture of bark under my fingertips, the way light danced upon leaves. Each sensation was vivid and complete. My mind did not wander. My heart did not rush. I was entirely absorbed in the now, entirely awake and yet profoundly at rest. I found a fallen tree and sat upon it, leaning against the rough surface. My back pressed to the trunk, my legs stretched along the forest floor, and I let myself sink deeper into stillness. I imagined my thoughts and emotions as leaves on the wind, floating, turning, falling gently to the earth. I did not chase them. I did not hold them. I simply let them move as the wind did. And in the spaces between each thought, each moment, I felt the quiet pulse of life, steady and reassuring. A soft rain began to fall, tiny droplets sprinkling over the pond and the forest floor. The sound was delicate, rhythmic, soothing. I breathed with it, each inhale a wave of presence, each exhale a wave of release. The rain did not disturb the pond's reflection. It enhanced it, adding texture, adding life. I understood that stillness is not rigid but flexible. It embraces life as it is, accepting movement without losing calm, welcoming change without resistance. I closed my eyes and let the rain fall upon my face, feeling each droplet as a small blessing. My body relaxed completely, my mind quieted further, and a profound sense of safety and completeness arose within me. In stillness, there is no hurry, no need to achieve, no fear of imperfection. There is only the quiet witness of life, the gentle pulse of being, the infinite depth of the present moment. I remembered the inner battle I had faced earlier the fears, regrets, and shadows. I understood now that stillness is the space in which all of these can be held without harm. The mind may stir, but awareness is steady. The heart may tremble, but presence is unshakable. Even in struggle, even in thought, stillness remains silent, patient. Infinite. As the rain ceased, the forest seemed to sigh, releasing a freshness that filled my lungs. I lay back on the moss, feeling the earth cradle me. The wind rustled through the branches. The pond reflected the sky like polished glass, and the first hints of evening painted soft gold across the treetops. I allowed my body to melt completely into the forest, my mind to dissolve into awareness, my spirit to rest in the vast embrace of being. In that perfect quiet, I realized something profound. Stillness is not the absence of life, it's the presence of all life in its fullest, deepest, simplest form. Every sound, every sight, every breath is an expression of stillness. Every movement, every change, every heartbeat is a part of it. To be still is to be alive, fully awake, completely present, and utterly at peace. I drifted into a state between wakefulness and sleep. The forest holding me, the pond reflecting my calm, the wind carrying a lullaby of leaves. The teaching of stillness was no longer just an idea, had become a living experience, flowing through me, wrapping around me, guiding me gently toward rest. I whispered quietly to myself, as if speaking to the forest itself, I am here. I am still. I am complete. And as the sky deepened into twilight, I allowed sleep to come, not as an interruption, but as a natural continuation of stillness, knowing that every breath, every thought, every moment carried the essence of peace, and that, in the quiet, I would always find my way home. When I awoke that morning, the world felt transformed, as if the entire forest had been painted anew in the softest hues of gold and green. Even the air seemed lighter, carrying the faint scent of blossoms, damp earth, and something ineffably sacred. I rose slowly, mindful of every movement, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin and the pulse of life beneath my feet. I realized that the teachings of the garden, the path, the inner battle, and the stillness had all converged into a single understanding, awakening of the mind, quiet yet luminous, profound yet simple. I walked along a familiar trail, yet it appeared entirely new. Each stone, each leaf, each tendril of vine caught my attention, revealing itself not as ordinary, but as part of an intricate web of life, interconnected, alive, and conscious. I breathed slowly, deliberately, feeling the rhythm of my heartbeat align with the world around me. For the first time, I understood the mind as not merely a vessel of thoughts, and memories, but as a mirror of awareness itself, fast, clear, and capable of holding everything without being shaken. A gentle stream appeared before me, sparkling as sunlight danced upon its surface. I knelt by the edge, dipping my fingers into the cool, flowing water. It slipped through my fingers effortlessly, and yet I sensed that it contained all the wisdom of movement and time. The stream reflected life as it truly was, not solid, but in constant flux, and yet complete. I marveled at the paradox and allowed it to settle within me, sensing that enlightenment was not something to grasp, but something to experience, to breathe. To be dot, as I followed the stream deeper into the forest, I encountered a small grove of bamboo, tall and slender, swaying gently in the breeze. I paused and closed my eyes, feeling the vibrations of the air, the whisper of each stalk as it bent and released. I imagined the bamboo as the mind itself, flexible, resilient, rooted, reaching, able to bend without breaking. The realization struck me like sunlight through the leaves. The enlightened mind is not rigid. It does not cling. It does not resist. It flows. It adapts. It observes. And it rests in the present. I continued walking until I reached a wide clearing. And there, bathed in light, stood a single lotus flower, blooming perfectly in the center of a shallow pond. I approached it slowly, each step measured, each breath deliberate, and I felt a profound stillness emanate from it. The lotus, rising from the depths of mud and darkness, untainted, luminous, was a mirror of my own journey. I realize that enlightenment is not a destination. It is the unfolding of awareness, the recognition of beauty, peace, and truth in every moment, even amidst imperfection, even amidst struggle. I sat beside the lotus, cross-legged, and allowed the sun's warmth to soak into my skin. I watched the ripples on the pond, noticing how they moved effortlessly, influenced by wind, water, and gravity, yet returning to calm naturally. I understood that the mind, like the water, could experience disturbances, yet beneath every ripple lay unshakable clarity. Thoughts may arise, emotions may surge, but the enlightened mind remains anchored in awareness, spacious, compassionate, and serene. A soft wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint murmur of life through the forest. I listened, and in that listening, I realized that awareness itself is the teacher. Every leaf, every sound, every heartbeat speaks the language of the present. Enlightenment is not learned, is remembered. It is the recognition that life is already whole, complete, and luminous. That the mind is not a prisoner of fear or desire, but a vast sky capable of holding clouds without judgment, without attachment, without resistance. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the presence of everything the soil beneath me, the water beside me, the light above me, the breeze around me, and the life that flows endlessly through it all. I sensed that the mind is not separate from the world. It is an integral part of it, inseparable, like the reflection of the sun in water. The moment I let go of striving, of clinging, of fear, the mind opened like a flower in sunlight. And in that opening, I felt a boundless joy, a serene freedom, a luminous awareness that required nothing from me and asked nothing in return. Time seemed to dissolve. Minutes, hours, even the rising and setting of the sun felt irrelevant. There was only presence, only awareness, only being. I noticed my thoughts as gently as one observes clouds passing across the sky. Never clinging, never resisting, simply noticing. I realized that enlightenment is not a destination beyond life. It is life itself, lived fully, vividly, consciously. Here and now, the lotus seemed to glow more brightly as I sat, reflecting light across the pond. I sensed a profound connection, a silent knowing that all beings are part of this luminous flow. Compassion arose naturally, without effort, without calculation. It was the natural extension of understanding, the result of recognizing that every being, every creature, every element of existence is intimately linked, part of the same vast, luminous mind. I lay back on the soft grass beside the pond, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face and the gentle pulse of life beneath me. The breeze whispered through the bamboo. The water rippled faintly, and the forest seemed to breathe with me. I felt the teachings of the garden, the path, the inner battle, and the stillness converge into one simple truth. The enlightened mind is awake, aware, and at peace. It is not something to achieve, but something to allow, to live, to embody in every moment. As the afternoon melted into evening, I watched the sun set in hues of orange and violet, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Each shadow, each ray of light seemed to carry a lesson. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is separate. Everything is connected. I felt a profound gratitude for the journey, for every struggle, every triumph, every quiet breath along the way. The enlightened mind does not cling to joy, nor resist sorrow. It rests in the flow of life, embracing all without judgment, without fear, without attachment. Night fell gently, wrapping the forest in a deep, protective darkness. Stars appeared, shimmering faintly, and the moon cast its soft, silver light across the pond. I felt an infinite calm descend upon me, a deep serenity that permeated every cell, every thought, every heartbeat. The mind was no longer restless, the heart no longer anxious, the spirit no longer searching. I was home, fully present, fully awake, fully at peace.